Hey everybody, I'm Todd Banner. Welcome to my channel. A while back, I did a video about an easy way to use polarizing filters on a advanced point and shoot. In my case, the Panasonic Lumix ZS100, also known as the TZ100 outside North America. And I mentioned that I was thinking about doing a video about when you use a polarizer and when you might not want to. So I thought I'd kind of do a quick video on that today. So, as I mentioned in that video, I don't use polarizers a whole lot. Yeah, I know you can use them to darken a blue sky, but that's pretty easy to do in post these days. So, they're most useful, I find, in taking care of reflections off of leaves, because leaves have one extent or another, a waxy coating that's highly reflective, and polarizers cut reflected light, because light hitting a non-metallic reflective surface becomes polarized. And actually there's two things going on. If it's hitting a non-metallic reflective surface, there's also refraction going on in the opposite angle to the reflection, which doesn't happen with a metallic surface. Actually, I found a pretty good video. It's a few years old about exactly how a circular polarizer works. So I'm going to link to that down in the description, so you might want to check it out. So yeah, and the other time to use it is if you were, let's just say you got hired to photograph a restaurant and they wanted shots of, maybe you hired some talent and they're supposedly having dinner inside the window. Windows are non-metallic and they reflect light, so you can use a polarizer to take care of that so you can see the people inside the window. But it's easy to overdo polarizing. So without further ado, let's take a look at some images, and I'll kind of go over when to use these and when you probably don't want to. All right, let's take care of the obvious use, and that is cutting reflections, especially if you're trying to photograph through a window. So here is the windshield of a car, and this is taken without a polarizer. And so what happens when we put a polarizer on the lens and turn it to the appropriate direction? And as you can see, now you can see directly into the car. So this is a really useful thing. It's very frequent that maybe you are taking a picture that you want to see what's inside a window, and polarizer is the way to do it. So here's a shot at a nearby bike path. And it's viewed north in the morning, sun's coming from the right, and there's a polarizer on the lens. And as I've mentioned before, most polarizers, good ones, have a little index mark that actually makes it pretty easy to use without even having to look through the viewfinder. You just line that index mark with where the sun is. And you can see here that you can see the definition in those clouds. Also, the foliage is nice and saturated. Now here's a similar shot with no polarizer, and as you can see, there's far less definition in the clouds, the sky is not saturated. You can see that the leaves are not, and the trees, or the foliage is not as saturated. But you can do the same thing in post. I mean, this is the exact same shot, but what I did was I put a sky mask on in Lightroom, and darkened the sky a little bit, used a dehaze filter, and then did an inverted sky mask for the rest of the image and increased the saturation. Here's a shot into the sun, and you can see the foliage has some sheen. So this is the waxy coating on the leaves. In this next shot, we're using a polarizer, and it's kind of subtle, but you can see that that sheen is somewhat reduced. Now, if you're shooting into the sun with foliage, you got to remember this: the lower the sun, the more of the light is actually going to be coming through the leaves rather than being reflected off the leaves. So if the sun's really low, you probably don't want to use a polarizer, because you have the increased risk of flare off the filter. So here's a similar comparison, but with the sun to the left and maybe a little in front of the lens. And this is with no polarizer. And this shot is with the polarizer, and it's subtle. Mainly up in the tree leaves you can see the difference, but you could probably get away with increasing saturation in post. Okay, so here's a shot of the edge of a prairie, And this is without a polarizer, and you can see this is actually pretty nice. I'm not sure it even needs a polarizer, but if you want to use a polarizer, one thing that happens is you're going to lose exposure. You can brighten that up in post, but you notice the sky is uneven. And that's a big problem with using a polarizer for wide angle shots. This is 25 millimeter equivalent, so you can see the upper left and the lower right of the sky is very much lighter than the polarized section in the middle. As it happens, there are 4 oak trees in the middle of this prairie, so I moved over there, and also as it happens, the branches of one of them actually kind of lined up so I could cover those light areas with the branches. But it's the image, the sky and the grass, I think is just a little too saturated for my taste. So here I backed off on the saturation in Lightroom. You could also do it just by using less polarization. You might have to scrub back and forth to see the difference, but this is just a little less saturated than the previous image. Hey, thanks for watching. If this was useful to you, please hit that like button. If you have any comments or questions, leave them down below. I'm Todd Banner. I will see you next time.